how do you change the culture of a nation? How do you turn a country around and make it a place that you can be proud of, even in the secret places, even in the highest halls of power, that you would know that the right things are being done for the right reasons? And this concept was born. The idea that you would train leaders to have a Christian worldview from a biblical perspective, to understand their calling to the marketplace, that they would feel empowered in the business world, that they're not second-class citizens if you're not standing behind a pulpit in a church, that you're probably most strategic for the great causes that God may have in mind for you because you're in business. And third, that they would have a mission of service for the community. That all the power, all the wealth, whatever opportunity or privilege may come your way as business people, you would understand every penny, every ounce of credibility, every platform or position of influence is given to you for the good of others. It is not your own. You owe it to the community. That idea, and to do it not in some seminar or workshop or weekend retreat, but could we take leaders in one community, in one single city, and start aiming at emerging leaders in that city and put them through a 9-month program that over time would surround them with other like-minded leaders, would drill these ideas into their minds and their hearts, and they would leave fixed on the idea of transforming the hearts and the minds of their companies, their churches, and the community as a whole. Now, it's a lofty goal, I know, and I'm a bit of an idealist, and it can sound like something that sounds pretty good, but in practice, can it happen? And let me tell you, my courage comes from the fact not only that I believe in a God who does impossible things, but that this has been done before. That history has proven to us that you can transform the heritage and legacy of a company, a family, a country even, through the acts of very few people. Did any of you see the movie Amazing Grace? And the story of William Wilberforce. I love this guy. I mean, I would name our child by his name, but my wife won't let me. She's afraid he'll go by Wilbur or something. But William Wilberforce, an amazing figure, was born in a family of privilege with great opportunity. He was one of the youngest members of the House of Lords in England in his early 20s. His best friend was William Pitt, who ended up being the youngest prime minister in the history of England at that time. And when William was at the very height of doors of opportunities opening up for him, he meets the Lord. And in his spiritual encounter, he finds himself in a crisis of faith where he believes, how could I be a politician when there's so much good to do in the world, there's so much charity that's needed, so many people need, good morning, God bless you. How do I do this? And he struggled and struggled, and the funny thing is his maids were going crazy because he's picking up homeless people and bringing them home and feeding them and picking up stray animals and bringing them into the house, and he's trying to find ways to make his life significant. And what he was suffering was an ailment that has plagued us as a human race, particularly in the West, and has sadly been most propagated by the church. The notion historically that there is a separation, that there are some people who do holy work. There are clergy, there are philosophers, there are nonprofit leaders who give themselves to some great cause, and then there are the rest of us money-grubbing business people. And that's just slower, less important, temporal world that does not matter as much for God because it doesn't make a difference. And that's what William was feeling. He thought, I can't be involved in the secular world when I really want to make a difference for God. And William, his buddy, really wanted him to stay in politics, but really for selfish reasons. He just wanted to have someone to go along this ride with him. But if you watch the movie, there's a particular scene where William kind of sets up an ambush in William Wilberforce's own home. And he invites a group of people known back then as the Clapham sect. The Clapham sect were a weird bunch. They were believers, Christians who believed that they could not just enjoy and experience their faith as a matter of personal expression, that their faith was of public concern, that if they were Christians and they believed in a God who owned this world and held them accountable as stewards of this world, they had to live a life that was actively making this world better in any way. It didn't matter what way it was, but that each of us had a responsibility to find out what are my giftings, what are the things that I can offer to the world, and towards what cause, towards what great good will I invest my life for. And they challenged William to think that, you know what, maybe you can do both. Shortly after that, William wrote in his journal 2 great objects. At Lifework Leadership, our program spends a lot of time reiterating to leaders the importance of just having a journal. Every participant actually receives one coming to the class, and we reinforce the importance of using it. See, in reality, personal transformation, a change of heart, can rarely happen at deep levels without reflection. You can't hear a talk and be transformed by just hearing something. Something in your heart has to happen. A perspective must shift in your mind, because something about your current perspective, worldview, way of believing things has brought you where you are right now. To set a different course, something has to shift inside of you. And few things are as powerful as just reflecting. And believers today, sadly, barely know what that means. We may know how to pray, and we may know how to crack open a Bible and read it, but do we know how to just stop and just be quiet and still and think about what you just read? Well, William's 2 notes in his journal were that he would set for himself 2 great objects in life. Number 1, the abolition of slavery. Now, this, you must understand, was ludicrous. It's the equivalent of me saying today that I will abolish the use of cars. I know that's a crude comparison, but you need to realize for people back then, that's exactly what it sounded like. Even for folks that were friendly to slaves, felt that the whole economy was built on it, that the nation, the empire of Britain, would collapse if such a thing was done. Now, as much as my heart cheers at the very thought of what happened because of William's endeavors, 3 days before he died at the age of 65, slavery was abolished in England, and America shortly after followed. But the second objective, I think, was the greater of the 2. The second objective, I believe, made possible the first one. It was the second objective that created the environment where it could even be a possibility for slavery to be abolished. And that was, he wanted to reform manners in England. Now, that sounds kind of silly, sounds hokey, like we want everybody to have tea at 6, but what he meant was he wanted to bring morality back. As difficult as the times that we're living are today, what we're suffering of the most is the lack of leaders who will inspire people for a higher level of motivation. There is a great, great lack of hope. You know what's interesting? In down economic times, you'd think that employees who see that their company is suffering financially or are kind of sliding into the red, they'd work a little harder, they'd strive better. We got to turn the company around. They'd want to put more emphasis and focus into their work. And research has proven the opposite is true. When people see the company isn't doing so well, they actually start working less. They surf the internet more. They take on more personal calls. Why? Because they don't feel the hope that they felt when the company was doing well. And my strong emphasis with business leaders, if you manage, lead other people, if you have responsibilities over the lives of others, your role, your key role, is to bring to them the hope of a significant purpose for why you're doing work together, for why you're doing business. And for our Lifework leaders coming out of the program, our challenge to them is that they would use every sphere of influence to have such an impact in people's lives. Because if you start having an impact in your business, you start having an impact in the families of the people that work in that business, you start having an impact in the neighborhoods that those families are in, and overall you start impacting the whole of culture. I personally believe that when God made Adam, Adam didn't have a PowerPoint projector with beautiful graphics and music and a CD with great worship songs or a hymn book even. Adam's only form of worship was to obey and work in the garden. And it's confirmed by the fact that in Genesis 2:15, the word there used to define work is an ancient Hebrew word that also means worship. It's the same word used to describe what the Levites did in the temple. Your work, the work of your hands, when done for the good of others and for the glory of God, brings worship to the ears of the Father. Well, if that is true, I also believe then that business is the most practical form of ministry. If you are not in a leadership position today, can I ask you something? Please do, please be. Pursue to have influence in other people, but for the right reason. Not to give yourself an ego stroke, not for a bigger paycheck, but to make a difference in the lives of other people, like only leaders in strategic positions and organizations can do. Spiritual people in the marketplace can have catalytic transformation in the world that we know today. I'll leave you with this thought that drives me every single day. I sincerely believe every single one of us should know this. You were created to make a difference. You were created to make a difference. And if you know that business has a purpose beyond profit, because its legacy is in the character of its people, you'll also know that your work has meaning beyond making money, because the character of your work reveals the image of your maker. Thank you very much. God bless. Thanks, Jimmy.